Hey there, marketers. Monique Ruiz from Claritas here with another Fireside Chat. This time, I'm welcoming Bryan Barletta, host of the Sounds Profitable podcast, which you can find via the link in the description box below. He's joining me in a conversation around the importance of independent measurement and what the announcement that Spotify has acquired two podcast attribution companies means for that. Bryan, welcome to your first Claritas Fireside Chat. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So I've got a bunch of questions for you, but can you start by telling our viewers a little bit more about yourself and your areas of expertise?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in ad tech for about 14 years now. The first half of it was in digital advertising, probably a lot of mobile rich media. And the second half was podcasting, which
Okay.
which is pretty cool. I started with Barometric. I was one of the founding members there, acquired by Claritas, and then I went on to Megaphone, and now I write Sounds Profitable, which is my love letter to the industry, trying to educate every single person in mid to enterprise companies on how all of this works, what we should be asking for, and how we can use it better to invite more advertisers into the space and to better educate every single person at these companies so that they can get better jobs, positions, and lead this industry forward.
Awesome. So you're definitely the right person to have on this fireside chat. So, in my introduction, I kind of briefly mentioned an announcement that Spotify made that they've acquired two podcast attribution companies. What are those two companies and what's their background?
Yeah, so Podsights and Chartable are the two attribution companies.
Okay.
Podsights is most well known for attribution first, where Chartable is more known for marketing. Both do offer similar feature sets where they're able to track podcast downloads on the prefix aspect and attribution on the ad campaign aspect. And they've just had a different appeal to different audiences. If I were and as I do reference previously, the top three I've always considered Podsights, Chartable, and Barometric to be a mix of the top three because they were formed within podcasting, understand the differences in our space equally, and have been bringing more companies into the space.
Okay. Okay. So now, does this announcement mean that advertisers who are currently using Chartable and Podsite solutions would now only be able to get those insights via Spotify and then need to go elsewhere for platform measurement other than what Spotify offers?
I think it's not completely clear from the
Okay.
announcement, but from what I'm hearing, it's not going to be all walled in behind Spotify. At a minimum, pod sites will be still something that can be used across any podcast campaign with dynamic ad insertion or prefix tracking. Chartable, it's a little less clear. It seems to be that it's going to become a megaphone product, which is Spotify's primary hosting platform or
Right.
enterprise hosting platform, but it's not clear if that means that people will be able to use it outside of Megaphone or if it'll just be built into the Megaphone platform instead of Chartable as a standalone. I
Got it.
think people that are using it, what they really need to think about is if they're hosting outside of Megaphone, Whooshka, or Anchor, which Spotify owns, what is the value of using those on to represent your downloads and to double check your numbers. And for advertising, you just need to be comfortable with the fact that this is first party data now instead of third
Yes.
party data.
Yeah. So I'm sure this question has crept up in a few people's minds just considering the environment that we live in today. But are there any privacy concerns with this? Since it's kind of logical to think that Spotify now has acquired new consumer data that was once collected and managed by Podsites and Chartable.
For me, I think that I want to break it into two sides. One
Okay.
is the fact that when Spotify bought Megaphone, I was very clear and vocal about the fact that like there are contracts that these publishers have that dictate how data is used and
Right.
who gets access to what. So if you are comfortable with Megaphone having used your data as a publisher, you should be comfortable with Spotify using it because those terms didn't change, right? You didn't get a
Hmm.
new contract that you were forced into. So on like the legal and privacy side and ethical side, I'm going to say that there isn't like a lawsuit based concern.
Okay.
I don't
Mhm.
think anyone's going to secretly steal data. I don't think any of that. But I think that a lot of people sign these things thinking that Megaphone was an independent, that Pod sites or Chartable were independents, and now they're part of something bigger. And
Mhm.
one thing that I touched on in my article really was around the fact that now these insights, even at aggregate level, because they Chartable and Pod sites have made incredibly clear that they're not going to provide granular level. They're not going to show your name, your advertisers, all of that. But even at aggregate level, the speed at which Spotify can receive that data and action on it versus the general public or versus you in just your campaign or account view, um, it does pose the question of, is your data going into these systems giving them an advantage to kind of be ahead of the curve of the entire space? And that, again, not a privacy concern, it's
Right.
purely a business concern. And I encourage everyone to reevaluate how they use this data because it is incredibly valuable. First party data is some of the most valuable. It's the whole industry is changing around it.
For
But
sure.
these were third party tools previously, and now they're first party tools. And so they need to be reevaluated from scratch as first party tools.
Okay. And so, what does this whole universe of what we call neutral third party podcast measurement companies look like now with this acquisition? And what does it even mean to be neutral?
I think neutral is a really loaded word, and I've had to explain it myself and dance around it too because I consider myself neutral or
Hmm.
unaffiliated, but I do have 65 sponsors that sounds profitable. So there's an argument to be made on there. So is a public company neutral?
Right.
Is a company that has a an agency associated to it neutral? It really depends. I think that neutral is tough. I think first party and third party is where I've begun to kind of shift my mindset because that is more definitive, right?
Yeah.
Spotify is augmenting pod sites with first party data and Chartable with first party data. Therefore, they can do more with it.
Hmm.
Whereas Claritas, for example, has their own data set, but that is completely owned and audited externally and not tied to inventory or not tied to an agency selling it. So
Right.
that is third party in that regard. Um, there are very few companies in podcasting that offer both analytics and attribution as podcasting first. Claritas does attribution, Podtrack does analytics. There are a few other companies in the space that have started to come in from externally, LeadsRx and LoopMe. And then there's some companies that are in the space that are looking to expand their offering. We've seen a Pixel from Magellan. We've seen one from Veritonic. But I think right now there's kind of a hole. I think as an industry, we got a little bit lazy. Um, or as investors, we decided not to compete with something that was, fighting for a single digit % of the share.
Yeah.
And we left it to two of the three companies. But right now, the space is changing, and there is a hole, and there's a lot of opportunity for us to ask more of the remaining third party partners, and
Hmm.
that kind of excites me.
Yeah. And that segues me a little bit into this next question. You've kind of touched on it a little bit, but can you walk us through what those primary advantages of an advertiser working with a third party measurement provider? And if there are any disadvantages, we'd like to hear those too.
Yeah, I think the advantage is if you think about advertising outside of podcasting, because podcasting is different, right? A lot of ad tech and podcasting came from someone building an ad server or a hosting platform rather, and their investors saying, "Well, now we need ads."
Yeah.
So everybody kind of built their own thing. There's no double click campaign manager for that. There's no centralized ad server. It all works a little bit differently. So in podcasting, the hard part is that it's all linear, right? So you make a request from your device to a hosting platform, which is on a server, to ask for an episode. That hosting platform is also the ad server, and so it fills it with ads. Then it makes a final episode and sends it all the way back down to your device. So from your phone, it's basically like downloading a file from Dropbox,
Mm-hmm.
but the hosting platform and ad server need to treat it like a download request, an ad request, and
Right.
fire out third-party pixels.
Yeah.
A lot of that is based around the idea that we're double counting verified information, right? If a hosting platform is IAB certified and you put a prefix tracker, prefix URL to double check the analytics, you're just basically saying, "Hey, both of you count my downloads and tell me which is right," which is
Yeah.
tough. And then for advertising, I don't think it's bad because we're not really focused on. I said on my hosting platform that this is an impression. They're not saying, "Well, we don't think it is an impression." They're more using it on the advertising side to track attribution. So I think what we're going to see and what the value of third party is that maybe we don't necessarily need it in podcasting for double counting
Hmm.
certified hosting platforms that are all linear. But what
Right.
we do need it for is tracking success of a campaign across multiple different platforms.
Okay.
And so for a third party, I think the biggest thing that we have in podcasting is the ability to track the success of a campaign from where the listener heard the ad or heard the show all the way to whatever action we want, which is downloading a new podcast, going to a website, an
Hmm.
app, going to a physical store, all of these things. That's the value in the third party, because that third party is not the one selling you the campaign and saying, I bet you we can get you the best conversion. They're the one saying, we'd like to measure to make sure your money was spent appropriately.
Hmm.
We'd like to
Right.
give you the insights to optimize to make sure that this campaign is successful, or to know when to cut your losses or change your campaign.
Yep. So I've talked about this on Claritas's podcast a few times, but why? And I mean, you're kind of hitting on it there with the potential double counting. But why do you think measurement and attribution are considered so difficult in the podcasting world? And how, as an industry, can we address these issues?
Oh, my opinion on that is completely contrary. I'm the jerk in the room saying that this is from weak salespeople. I think
Okay.
that download's a killer metric. I think it works great. We don't yell at people who sell billboards or the ads on gas stations or
Yeah.
mailers about the accuracy there. We have enough data to vet that downloads are almost always initiated by people who are about to listen to them. Auto downloads have ways to shut off. There's also plenty of information to let you know, like when a show drops off on
Hmm.
listenership, and those are pretty industry standard. So it's easy to assume that 75% or more of all downloads are listened to, and most of them are listened to at least about 75% of the show, right?
Hmm.
And so to me, I think that that is really valuable to look at and say those metrics work, right? Um, I think that the double counting of a third party saying, well, the host said you had 1 million downloads and we only see 900,000 is tough, because the framework in podcasting isn't built in a way to argue that.
Mm.
It's the IAB certification isn't built in a way that they should match their
Right.
difference of opinions, right?
Yeah.
They're different 24-hour periods, all of these things. So I don't know how much we gain from that, but I really think our metrics are solid, and I think that the value of all this technology is how do we make the next campaign good?
Yeah.
And so I think the more people that come into the space, the more pieces of the technology that say this data is accurate, that helps more. I think it's less about saying A is better than B. That's really
Okay.
my focus.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's fair enough. So back to the Spotify announcement
Yeah.
specifically. What competitive advantages does this give Spotify against other providers, and why is it so important in the measurement space?
Well, Spotify has approached things kind of like a walled garden previously. I mean, when
Yeah.
you think about it, Spotify's data is super valuable. I made a comment in my article about, imagine looking at 3 years of the data around what you listen to for music the week of Valentine's Day. What can that tell you about that, right? What do the songs say? What of all that? And then you compare it to Facebook. What do you post around Valentine's
Right.
for 3 years? I bet you that music tells you a way, way more accurate story about what's going on, who you are, than Facebook does.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Spotify has always been, keeping that stuff close to their chest. And I don't blame them. I mean, they are a walled garden. That's how the businesses work. So by taking this internally, they can use it exactly how they want and expose only what they want to share for success, and give clients their confidence
Hmm.
leaning on the name of Podsights and Chartable, which they add. But I say that, unfortunately, because it's brought internally, that confidence goes away, right? It doesn't mean the data is not valuable. It doesn't mean it's not going to like accurately let you enhance a campaign or drive immediate success or learn what to abandon but you can't vet it.
Hmm.
You can't call it into question. And that's a sign of a walled garden.
Yeah.
So I think that competitive advantage is that Spotify is going to, on their network, whether it's in the app or across all the things that they sell for dynamic ad insertion, it's going to be a really powerful tool augmented by data from podcast listeners on Spotify and all those amazing trends and data that they haven't made available previously. And they're talking about even letting it go into banners, into streaming radio or streaming audio and all these other formats. Wild, right? That honestly is a very exciting thing
Yeah.
for data and audio. But I think the problem here is that Um, as a publisher, as another hosting platform, every time those pixels fire on my inventory or on my campaign, I'm sharing information. If I set up a campaign in those platforms and I say, this is my strategy, these are the
Mm-hmm.
shows that I'm running on, all of that, now I'm part of their first party data, whether I like it or not.
Yeah.
They're not going to take the individual, but they aggregate it up, right? The shows that are successful. So the Spotify is going to be great at being able to say, wow, in March every year, health and fitness or like self-improvement podcasts are way undersold because of a giant flux in them at the beginning of the year. And so this is the dip. And also, all of these advertisers' budgets increase that would be perfect for that.
Right.
And they're going to be able to see on platform that they sell and off of platform with this data and be able to approach those clients.
So you've spoken about this in some of your other responses, but there does seem to be some concern about this whole Spotify announcement, especially from advertising agencies and publishers. Can you kind of go into what the foundation of all that would be, though?
I think that they're just frustrated.
Okay.
I think that we had a really cool open space, and I don't fault Spotify for being a business. Like, good on
Yeah.
them for
Yeah.
going
Exactly.
at that. But I think that we're all kind of saying, like, we got the tools, we know how to use them, let's use them better, and we were seeing innovation. Um, I think Chartable was bought before its prime. I think Chartable is a great example of a company that had great tech and was marketed into a corner.
Mm.
And it's sad to see because some of their recent announcements would have really pushed everybody to do better. Claritas, Pod Sites, all of you guys to really ramp it up and to release new and exciting and competitive features. But the fear now is that taking two out of those three top names off the table first party, potentially changing the roadmap, and if not, aligning it with a different vision
Mm-hmm.
means that the advertiser, the agency, the publisher are not the primary customer right now. And so I think it's just I think there's problems in those platforms that we forgave because they worked and they were independent, and now we need to assess if we're still going to forgive them while they're part of a bigger company, and we need to also assess, is the trade-off of data worth the success of the campaign? But we have to definitively know that this is not third-party data anymore, and this isn't what you can say, my campaign was successful, I
Right.
trust you,
Right.
because it's business. There's
Yeah.
no negative in not trusting someone in business. That's why we have these third-party tools. And the person selling the media can't say, well, I had another division of my company confirm that my numbers are right. That's
Yeah.
just, it doesn't fly. And I think that that's where it feels like a sadness. I
Yeah.
might be the weird person in the space who's like actually emotional and excited, and I love all this stuff. Like, I have a cool opportunity to be like this influencer in this aspect of the space. Um, and yeah, it feels like we got a hole.
Announcement aside, what would be your top recommendations for advertisers who are looking for a measurement partner? What should they consider as kind of their non-negotiables?
Oh, customer service.
Okay.
I've seen this weird trend in the space. And this like I have enjoyed working with Claritas multiple times, and all the companies that I mentioned, I've enjoyed it a lot. But there's an inability of buyers to vocalize their needs
Mm.
and like draw a line. And so these buyers are in these situations where they opt into using these tools and they're doing their best to use them, but they're the ones paying. And so when something happens and they have to, as the buyer, make a concession, that doesn't feel right. So to
Yeah.
me, I think the biggest thing right now is customer service, someone to educate and walk you through it, because that's most important. I think at the end of the day, all third-party measurement, all attribution is you believing in the support and infrastructure provided by one of these partners. And so that relationship really does matter. That's someone you need to call into and say, this report doesn't look right. I
Hmm.
don't understand. Could you help break this down? Where should I go from here? And
Right.
so to me, that's the most important thing, because they're all going to be similar with different approaches, right? Different data sets to augment and whatnot. My biggest advice for all of these companies is RFP everybody.
Mm.
I 100% think that everybody should reevaluate every single third party they're working with and see what the options are out there. Again, I think what's neat here is that there's the opportunity now to use Podsites and Podsites and Chartable at the same time
Yeah.
as a third party vendor. Because in the same way on Megaphone, if I were to target with Nielsen segments, I could still use third party attribution on it to
Mm-hmm.
measure it.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't clutter it like I think people say it does. It doesn't remove it from your tools. It's just now a different tool.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that customer service, I think that figuring out what your actual need is important. Because I think we focus so much on prefix URLs when we started this industry before dynamic ad insertion. And that's the idea that before it downloads the full file, it calls the third party first and says, I'd like to download the file.
Mm.
They say,
Okay.
thanks for your info. We're going to kick you back. We'll tell you where the real file is. And that's neat, but maybe we're past that. Maybe we need a better way to download or to identify baked in ads. Maybe we need a better way to track ads that the hosting partners need to provide, because the big thing that a prefix brings into question is, do you trust your hosting platform or do you trust the third party whose numbers are going to be accurate?
Right.
So I think you need to say, as a buyer, as a publisher, what are my actual needs and what did I use because it was the primary push of that platform? And then how do I vocalize my needs? When you make that RFP and a client doesn't come back, or the third party doesn't come back with what you needed out of the product, I think it's okay to tell them very clearly where they fell short and give them the opportunity, if you like the other stuff, to win your business.
Yeah.
Because I think we're going to see a lot of publicly visible roadmaps to make this possible in the future, to kind of expand the space.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you said it best. If you're the customer, the client, you got to get what you're paying for. So,
Absolutely.
so Bryan, I've enjoyed our chat so far. It's definitely been super informative for me, who's not kind of in the day-to-day weeds on these things. So I appreciate you educating me, as well as the people that are viewing this fireside chat. But I'm going to keep you from having to answer questions for the rest of the day by kind of wrapping things up with just a couple final ones.
Yeah.
So, when you look back on the past couple of years, you can see that Spotify has made several acquisitions, and you talked about a few of them earlier. Is there any reason to be concerned that there isn't enough healthy competition left for them?
Podcasting is such a weird, like, artsy community, and like a good way. Like, it makes me feel like the East Village in New York, where everybody's just like, art's gonna live. We're we're gonna push back, and I don't know. I think there's something neat about it. It's gonna hold on. I think there's a lot of room. I think
Okay.
that podcasting as a term is so large. Like what we're doing right now is video, but it's also a podcast. There's
Right.
no reason this can't be uploaded on an RSS feed if it isn't already. There's no reason a video isn't a podcast. We have so many podcasts on YouTube now.
Mm-hmm.
But that, compared to the high production value of stuff like Q Code, right, which I consider in like the Hollywood-esque category, and then in between that, the core podcasters like Crooked Media and Pod Save America, those type of things from there. That's a wide gamut, right?
Yeah.
Something that can win a Canes Award, and then what me and you decide to record and just upload on from our phones
Right. Right.
is so wide. So I think podcasting is going to be split up in different ways. I see a future where a lot of these streaming services start to bring podcasts into their app. You can already see it with HBO Max.
Mm-hmm.
While you can't turn the screen off to listen to it, they have several podcasts in the HBO Max app.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Yeah, but you got to leave the screen on with one static image. They got to work on that. But then you remove Hollywood, and then what do you have? You have core podcasting and long tail. And long tail feels like it's not being handled well. But I think when we think about long tail, it's scary, right? We've told all these people that you can Twitch stream, you can YouTube, you can podcast to make money. I don't believe that's the case. I think that this is kind of misleading to a lot of
Yeah.
people, that you talk into a microphone and you make money. It's like starting a store, right? If you
I
told me you wanted to
wish.
start a retail store and you're like, I'm not going to, invest any money. We're just going to hang out with the shirts on the side of the road. Well, you're going to sell about as many as I think you will.
Right. Right.
But core podcasting is going to flourish. And I think we'll see some core podcasters pop off. But I think we'll see more realize they can expand and be on Spotify uniquely, and be on Apple uniquely, and on YouTube and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And the open nature of podcasting makes it exciting for people to pull pieces off of it and do their own thing. But I think that there will always be a core of it. But you're seeing it right now. YouTube is one of the highest experience ways to consume a podcast, whether audio or video.
Mm-hmm.
Podcast is podcast and influencer, podcast and like not celebrity, but like it's a brand.
Yeah.
It's instead of saying like I'm not a YouTuber anymore, I'm a podcaster.
Podcaster.
So
Yeah.
I think podcasting is going to stay around for a long time. I think it's going to become part of most people's bigger picture. And I think the industry is going to change rapidly in 2 years, but I think there will be an industry and it'll be fun and fantastic and it will continue to perform well for advertisers.
Okay. That's a great positive way to end the conversation.
Yeah.
So thank you, Bryan, for joining me for this fireside chat.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I want to give you a chance to plug anything new and exciting that's coming up for you. So please tell our viewers what's next for you and let them know how they can reach you if they want to connect.
Absolutely. So soundsprofitable.com is the main website for everything. There's a weekly newsletter written by me and a few other guests like Kayla Littman. And we kind of just unravel and explain all the things that are going on with how this technology works or how you should be looking at the data, which Kayla covers.
Okay.
We have a weekly podcast where I interview really interesting people in the space who have something that we can apply through ad tech to podcasting, which is really important to me. And then my favorite thing that we've ever done is we call it the download. Every Friday, it's built specifically for the people in business of podcasting. It's podcast only. It's 10 minutes or less, and it's hosted by Manuela Bedoya and Shreya Sharma, and both of them are fantastic. We spend the entire week reading through over 30 sources, over 100 articles to figure out what the people, the execs, the middle management, the people really driving the industry forward in podcasting need to know about the greater world of business and advertising that weigh in on it so that you don't have to spend a week reading 100 articles.
Yeah.
And so that can be found on Sounds Profitable as well, or pod.link/the download. And I would love for everybody to check that one out because it is the first thing we built at Sounds Profitable where I've moved away. I'm excited to not be the voice of it. I'm excited to grow Sounds Profitable and really highlight amazing people like Manuela and Shreya, who are absolutely fantastic people in this space. Everyone should know.
Awesome. We'll make sure to link everything so that you guys viewing can go to those links easily.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bryan. So thanks again to everyone tuning in for our special fireside chat all about what's happening in the podcast world and how that affects independent measurement. For more information on this topic, visit our website, www.claritas.com. We'll see you next time. Bye now.